Welcome back guys. Now let's continue our discussion with the loop of Henle. We have already discussed about proximal convoluted tubule and what happens in the proximal convoluted tubule. Now let's discuss about the next part of nephron and its functions. Guys, before discussing about loop of Henle, let's see what are the parts of loop of Henle. See, right now whatever I am pointing, this area, this is descending limb of loop of Henle. Okay, this segment of nephron which is down to Bowman's capsule, which is down to proximal convoluted tubule. Actually, here will be the proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, this area will be the proximal convoluted tubule. We have discussed about the proximal convoluted tubule. Right now, we are discussing about the part of nephron which is down to proximal convoluted tubule, that is loop of Henle. And this part is the descending limb of loop of Henle. And the next part to it is the hairpin turn. Okay, this pointing area is the hairpin turn and this area is the ascending limb of loop of Henle. The urinary ultrafiltrate is going to come from proximal convoluted tubule into the descending limb of loop of Henle, into the hairpin turn, and the urinary ultrafiltrate is going to ascend up in the ascending limb of loop of Henle, and from there it will reach the distal convoluted tubule. Okay, so let's discuss about what exactly happens in the loop of Henle. Now, we have already discussed that the urinary ultrafiltrate which is reaching the descending limb of loop of Henle is 300 milliosmoles, which is isotonic to plasma. Why it is isotonic to plasma? We have already discussed in the topic of PCT. Why? Because the same amount of solutes and same amount of solvents, that is water, is absorbed in a same proportion. Same amount of solutes and same amount of water is being reabsorbed. So, the urinary ultrafiltrate is having 300 milliosmoles, which is isotonic to plasma. That's completed. Now, what happens to this urinary ultrafiltrate? While the urinary ultrafiltrate, while it is moving down the descending limb of loop of Henle, only water is going to be reabsorbed. In this image, you can clearly see only water is being reabsorbed. Is there any other solvents being reabsorbed? Absolutely no. So, I can say the descending limb of loop of Henle is only permeable for water reabsorption. Why the water is getting reabsorbed? It's because, see, when you are going deep into the medulla, okay, actually this loop of Henle's, these loop of Henle's are the part of which nephrons? They are the part of juxtamedullary nephrons. We have already seen the juxtamedullary nephrons are having a deep loop of Henle or big loop of Henle which is going deep down into the medulla. So, this descending limb of loop of Henle is going deep into the medulla of the kidney. So, please concentrate. While you are going down deep into the medulla, the medullary interstitium is having higher concentrations. The medullary interstitium is having higher osmolarity. In the starting part of medulla, the osmolarity is 300, but when you go deep down into the medulla, the medullary interstitium is having an osmolarity of 1200. So, we all know solutes are the ones which love to attract the water. So, while the urinary ultrafiltrate is moving down the descending limb of loop of Henle, all this water is getting reabsorbed. All this water is getting attracted by the solutes which is present in the medulla, and those solutes are the ones responsible for creating the medullary hyperosmolarity. Why we are calling it as hyperosmolarity? Why? Because normal blood osmolarity or the plasma osmolarity is somewhere around 300 milliosmoles, but deep in the medulla, the medullary osmolarity is 1200, so that's why we are calling it as hyperosmolarity, and this hyperosmolarity is the one which is helping in attracting the water, okay, attracting the water to the medullary interstitium. Now, I am going to ask you one question. If the water is getting reabsorbed, what happened to the concentration of urine at hairpin turn? All this water is being reabsorbed. As the water is being reabsorbed, the urine will become concentrated. So, at the hairpin turn, the urine will also become highly concentrated of 1200 milliosmoles. Okay, so the urine is getting equilibrated, okay, according to the medullary concentration. Now, what are some important MCQs? Can I call this descending limb of loop of Henle concentrating segment or diluting segment? See, it's a concentrating segment. Why? Because the urine is getting concentrated. So, it's a concentrating segment for the urine. And one more important MCQ I want to put into your mind is that, see, the water is getting reabsorbed with the help of a channel or with the help of a transporter, I say. So, what is the name of this transporter? So, this name of the transporter is aquaporins. Okay, aquaporin 1 is the water channel which is present in the descending limb of loop of Henle through which water is getting reabsorbed. Okay guys, now let's write down some important points or some important MCQs regarding the descending limb of loop of Henle. Now, we have seen that descending limb of loop of Henle is only permeable to water. Okay, it's only permeable to water and it is impermeable to ions. Okay, ions or I can say solutes. Okay, now this descending limb of loop of Henle, is it concentrating segment or diluting segment? It's a concentrating segment. Okay, it's a concentrating segment for the urine. Now, water reabsorption is going to happen in the descending limb of loop of Henle with the help of which transporters or which channels? It's the aquaporin 1 channels. Okay, but because there are aquaporin 2 channels which we will be discussing subsequently. Okay guys, now we have seen descending limb of loop of Henle. Now let's discuss about the ascending limb of loop of Henle. The urinary ultrafiltrate is going to moving down the descending limb of loop of Henle, and this urinary ultrafiltrate will reach the hairpin turn, and now this urinary ultrafiltrate is going to come into the ascending limb of loop of Henle. Now please concentrate, the descending limb of loop of Henle is only permeable to water. So that the urinary ultrafiltrate is becoming concentrated as all the water is being reabsorbed from the aquaporin 1 channels. The urine is getting concentrated and the urine will become almost 1200 milliosmoles. Now this concentrated urine will reach the ascending limb of loop of Henle. Now what happens here? See, I just want you to know some important points here. What are they? On the ascending limb of loop of Henle, there are these epithelial cells. Okay, this blue color cell is the epithelial cell. Okay, this blue color cell is an epithelial cell. And if you concentrate on the luminal surface, means this surface, this area, on the luminal surface of this epithelial cell, there is this one important transporter present. Okay, this important transporter. Now, what this important transporter is doing? This transporter is helping in the reabsorption of ions. Which ions? Sodium, potassium, and chloride. So, I can say this transporter which is present on the luminal surface of the epithelial cell, which is presenting on the ascending limb of loop of Henle, is helping in the reabsorption of solutes. Which solutes? Sodium, potassium, and 2 chlorine ions. So, I can say this transporter is known as sodium potassium 2 chloride symporter. Okay, so why it is a symporter? Why? Because ions are moving in the same direction. Sodium, potassium, and 2 chloride ions are getting reabsorbed with the help of this transporter. Okay, now I'm going to ask you some questions, guys. Now the ascending limb of loop of Henle is permeable to solutes or solvents. Is it permeable to ions or is it permeable to water? Only ions. Okay, so the ascending limb of loop of Henle is permeable to ions or solutes. Okay. Now, as the ions are getting reabsorbed, solutes are getting reabsorbed, what happened to the concentration? If you take out all the sodium, potassium, 2 chlorine, now again the urinary ultrafiltrate will become diluted. So, as the urinary ultrafiltrate, while it is moving like this, the ascending limb of loop of Henle, the urine will become diluted. So, the ascending limb of loop of Henle is diluting segment. Okay, it's a diluting segment. Okay, so these are 2 important points which I want you to know. Here itself, I just want you to know one more point. What is that? Sir, you have discussed that the medullary interstitium is having a hyperosmolarity of 1200 milliosmoles. It is so much concentrated. So how the medullary interstitium have become so much concentrated? See, the medullary interstitium is hyperosmolar because of this important transporter, that is sodium potassium 2 chlorine symporter. Now what it is doing, you can see it is reabsorbing all this sodium, potassium and chlorine, and all this sodium, potassium, chlorine, where they are coming? They are coming into the medullary interstitium. All this sodium, chlorine and some other solutes are also going to come and deposit in the medullary interstitium. So as all the solutes are coming and getting deposited in the medullary interstitium, medulla have hyperosmolarity, so much concentration because of all these solutes. All these solutes are coming into the medulla is because of the sodium, potassium 2 chlorine symporter, which is present on the luminal surface of ascending limb of loop of Henle. Okay, so these are some important points. Now I just want you to know some points regarding pharmacology. Okay, something like pharmacological integration. Sodium potassium 2 chloride symporter is blocked by, okay, there are certain drugs which can block the sodium potassium 2 chloride symporter. So those drugs are called as loop diuretics. Okay, so loop diuretics are the drugs which will act on the loop of Henle. So why they are called as loop diuretics? Because they are acting on the ascending limb of loop of Henle, and they are blocking sodium potassium 2 chloride symporter. And now what is this name diuretics? Diuresis means too much urination, excessive production of urine. Why there is excessive production of urine? Now let's go to your basic concept. Your basic concept is, see, the water is getting reabsorbed in the descending limb of loop of Henle. See, this is the area, right? This is the area where water is getting reabsorbed. Water reabsorption happens. Now, why water reabsorption happens? Water is getting reabsorbed because there is medullary hyperosmolarity. Now comes the question, why there is medullary hyperosmolarity? Hyperosmolarity is because of sodium potassium 2 chlorine symporter, which is making the medullary interstitium highly concentrated. Now, for example, think like this. If you block this transporter with the help of a drug, if you block this transporter, now sodium potassium 2 chlorine reabsorption is not going to happen. If sodium potassium 2 chlorine reabsorption is not happening, means the medullary hyperosmolarity is going to decrease. If medulla is not hyperosmolar enough, if medulla is not hyperosmolar, I am repeating, if medullary hyperosmolarity is not there, means will water reabsorption happen in descending limb of loop of Henle? No. So water reabsorption is going to be decreased. If water reabsorption is decreased, what happens? All that urine will be lost from the body. All the, the reabsorption is not going to happen. There will be too much production of the urine, that is diuresis. There are certain conditions where you need to take out excess fluid from the body. For example, if the patient is having pulmonary edema, if the patient is having ascites, okay, anasarca, in these conditions you need to take out excessive fluids from the body. So you have to cause the diuresis, and how you can cause the diuresis is by blocking this transporter, that is sodium potassium 2 chlorine symporter, with the help of drugs called as loop diuretics. Now, can you name some important loop diuretics? Two important loop diuretics are furosemide, torsemide, okay. So these drugs, furosemide, torsemide, ethacrenic acid, all these are the examples of loop diuretics. Now let's discuss about a condition where the patient is having mutation in sodium potassium 2 chlorine symporter. Now there was this one person who is having mutation in his sodium potassium 2 chlorine symporter. Now just think logically. If there is a mutation of sodium potassium 2 chlorine symporter, what happens? In the ascending limb of loop of Henle, the sodium potassium 2 chlorine are not getting reabsorbed. All the sodium potassium 2 chlorine are going to lost in the urine. Medullary interstitium is not going to be hyperosmolar. So the patient is going to have diuresis. Okay. Now, what is the name of this syndrome? So the syndrome in which the sodium potassium symporter got mutated, the name of the syndrome is Bartter syndrome. Okay, so Bartter syndrome is a mutation of sodium potassium 2-chlorine symporter. Now they can ask you a question something like this: Bartter syndrome resembles loop diuretic over usage or over dosage. See, think like this. For example, there was this one person who is using too much amount of loop diuretics. Now what loop diuretics will do? Loop diuretics are going to go and block the sodium potassium 2-chlorine symporter. If I am having Bartter syndrome, then also sodium potassium 2-chlorine symporter is going to be affected. So in both the conditions, the affected protein or affected transporter is sodium potassium 2-chlorine symporter. So Bartter syndrome is something resembles loop diuretic over usage. Okay. Now in this image, what's being depicted? Guys, please concentrate. This is descending limb of loop of Henle. This is the hairpin turn and this is ascending limb of loop of Henle. We have discussed that in the starting part of descending limb of loop of Henle, the medullary interstitium is having how much osmolarity? Not medullary interstitium, the urinary ultrafiltrate. The urinary ultrafiltrate, which is reaching the descending limb of loop of Henle, is having 300 milliosmoles. While it is going down, please concentrate. While it is going down, the urinary ultrafiltrate is becoming concentrated. The urine is getting concentrated. Why the urine is getting concentrated? Why? Because water reabsorption is happening. Okay, the water is getting reabsorbed. Now, try to understand like this. See, water is reabsorbed with the help of which transporter? Aquaporin 1. Where the water is coming now? The water is coming into the renal medulla. Why? Because renal medulla is having too much amount of solutes and those solutes are the ones which are attracting the water. Now think logically. If all this water stays here in the renal medulla, what happens? If all this water is getting stored in the renal medulla, if it's getting placed in the renal medulla, this water can wash out the solutes. This water can dilute the solutes so that the renal medulla interstitium, the renal medullary interstitium can become again hypoosmolar. Okay, renal medulla is having hyperosmolarity because of the solutes. But if all this water, whatever is getting reabsorbed, if it stays in the renal medulla, this water can wash out the solutes and can affect the renal medullary osmolarity. So, nature has provided a route for the transport of this excessive water again back into the systemic circulation. What is that route? See, all this excess water, whatever is getting reabsorbed, all this water will be again taken back to the systemic circulation with the help of a blood vessel. What is this blood vessel? This blood vessel is nothing but the vasa recta. Okay, see here in the descending limb of loop of Henle, urine is moving in this direction, in the downward direction. But if you look properly in the vasa recta, blood is moving in the opposite direction. So this vasa recta is going to collect all this excessive water and it's going to take back to the systemic circulation. Okay, so that's what I want to put into your mind. And if you properly concentrate in the ascending limb of loop of Henle, see, water reabsorption is not happening. Water is not at all getting reabsorbed. Only the sodium, potassium and chlorine, sodium, potassium, chloride ions are getting reabsorbed. And where they are getting placed? They are placed in the renal medulla. And this is the one which is maintaining the renal medullary osmolarity. Okay. Now, let's see two important MCQs which are constantly asked in your exam. Medullary hyperosmolarity is created by. Guys, just for the time's sake, know this one point, later we will discuss in detail. The medullary hyperosmolarity we have already discussed that it's mainly because of the sodium, potassium, 2-chlorine symporter. Okay, so this is the transporter which is mainly involved in creating the medullary hyperosmolarity. Now, if they ask you what is the mechanism, the mechanism is countercurrent multiplier system. Okay, so with the help of this countercurrent multiplier, what exactly is the countercurrent multiplier? Countercurrent means, see, the urine in the loop of Henle is moving in one direction and the blood in the vasa recta is moving in the opposite direction because of the opposite currents. Okay, this is known as counter current. And what is that multiplier system? We will discuss. Just for the time's sake, know that the medullary hyperosmolarity is created by counter current multiplier system with the help of which transporter? Sodium, potassium, 2 chloride importer. Okay, and I have already said you who is maintaining the medullary hyperosmolarity. See, it's the vasa recta which is constantly reabsorbing that excessive water from the medullary interstitium. If that excessive water is present in the medullary interstitium, all that solutes will be washed away and the medullary hyperosmolarity will be affected. But as there is vasa recta, all that excessive water is again taken back into the systemic circulation. So, medullary hyperosmolarity is maintained by vasa recta. Okay. So, medullary hyperosmolarity is maintained by vasa recta but created by counter current multiplier system with the help of sodium, potassium, 2 chloride importer. Okay. Now, there is one more point which I want you to know. You have seen counter current multiplier system. If someone comes to you and asks you, counter current multiplier system is helping in generation of medullary hyperosmolarity. But there is something also called as counter current exchanger. What is this counter current exchanger? This counter current exchanger is nothing but the vasa recta. I have said counter currents, the urine in the loop of Henle and the blood in the vasa recta, they are moving opposite to each other. So, counter current and exchanging is happening, right? So, whatever the fluid coming out of the loop of Henle, that's getting jumped into the vasa recta. So, this is exchange. So, with the help of counter current exchanger, the medullary hyperosmolarity is maintained. With the help of counter current multiplier system, the medullary hyperosmolarity is created. Okay, so we have completed important points regarding the loop of Henle. Let's continue with the topic of distal convoluted tubule.